سنريهم آياتنا في الآفاق وفي أنفسهم حتى يتبين لهم أنه الحق. أولم يكف بربك أنه على كل شيء شهيد.
وما كان هذا القرآن أن يفترى وما كان هذا القرآن أن يفترى من دون الله ولكن تصديق الذي بين يديه وتفصيل الكتاب لا ريب فيه من رب العالمين.
ولقد خلقنا الإنسان من سلالة من طين ثم جعلناه نطفة في قرار مكين ثم خلقنا النطفة علقة فخلقنا العلقة مضغة فخلقنا المضغة عظاما فكسونا العظام لحما ثم أنشأناه خلقا آخر فتبارك الله أحسن الخالقين. ولقد خلقنا الإنسان من سلالة من طين ثم جعلناه نطفة في قرار مكين ثم خلقنا النطفة علقة فخلقنا العلقة مضغة فخلقنا المضغة عظاما فكسونا العظام لحما ثم أنشأناه خلقا آخر فتبارك الله أحسن الخالقين. سنريهم آياتنا في الآفاق وفي أنفسهم حتى يتبين لهم أنه الحق. أولم يكف بربك أنه على كل شيء شهيد. اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق خلق الإنسان من علق اقرأ وربك الأكرم الذي علم بالقلم علم الإنسان ما لم يعلم.
وما كان هذا القرآن أن يفترى وما كان هذا القرآن أن يفترى من دون الله ولكن تصديق الذي بين يديه وتفصيل الكتاب لا ريب فيه من رب العالمين.
ووضع الكتاب فترى المجرمين مشفقين مما فيه ويقولون يا ويلتنا ما لهذا الكتاب لا يغادر صغيرة ولا كبيرة إلا أحصاها ووجدوا ما عملوا حاضرا ولا يظلم ربك أحدا.
وما كان هذا القرآن أن يفترى وما كان هذا القرآن أن يفترى من دون الله ولكن تصديق الذي بين يديه وتفصيل الكتاب لا ريب فيه من رب العالمين.
It has been a great pleasure for me to help clarify statements in the Quran about human development. It is clear to me that these statements must have come to Muhammad from God or Allah, because almost all of this knowledge was not discovered until many centuries later. This proves to me that Muhammad must have been a messenger of God or Allah.
ولقد أسعدني جدا أن أشارك في توضيح هذه الآيات والأحاديث التي تتحدث عن الخلق في القرآن الكريم والحديث الشريف، ويتضح لي أن هذه الأدلة حتما جاءت لمحمد من عند الله، لأن كل هذه المعلومات لم تكتشف إلا حديثا وبعد قرون عدة، وهذا يثبت لي أن محمدا رسول الله.
أفمن شرح الله صدره للإسلام فهو على نور من ربه فويل للقاسية قلوبهم من ذكر الله أولئك في ضلال مبين يريدون ليطفئوا نور الله بأفواههم والله متم نوره ولو كره الكافرون.
And the external appearance of the embryo during this phase is similar to that of blood due to the appearance of the primitive heart and the cardiovascular system. If you look at the picture at the bottom, it shows an embryo of about 22 or 23 days, and the bottom is the yolk sac, and the embryo is the part at the top, and you see all these blood vessels. And if you were to see an embryo at that stage, and I should say that most embryos will undergo spontaneous abortion at about this stage. In other words, when they're about 2 or 3 weeks old, they will often spontaneously abort. That means that they just are expelled from the mother's uterus without a known cause, although we've done a lot of studies on this and find that many of them have very abnormal chromosomes, and they couldn't have survived if they had lived. So, as we used to say in the old days, this was God's way of ridding the body of something that was very abnormal. But anyway, we do know that they are aborted at this early stage, and they do look like a clot of blood, because when they pull away from the uterus, then you have all these exposed blood vessels which have the bloody appearance. So this explains one interpretation for Alaka as a blood clot. I prefer the one being a leech-like structure. Now, the blood does not circulate until the end of the 3rd week, but on the 21st day, the heart of the embryo connects with blood vessels in the embryo, the connecting stalk, and the chorion, and the blood starts to circulate, as you could see in this diagram in the bottom. Thus, the embryo takes the appearance of a blood clot, even though its blood is fluid. And these features incorporate the other meaning of a blood clot for the Alaka phase. Now, the next stage is the Mudga stage. And again, when I was asked what this meant, it says, it reminded me of an embryo at this stage. And when I was told that the Mudga meant a chewed substance, I thought of the embryo here. You see these little bead-like structures, which we call somites. They are beginning of what will be the vertebrae or the backbone. And I suggested that this chewed stage could be referring to these somites, which have the appearance of a chewed substance. If you take, as I did at that time, took a piece of gum and bit into it, and you're left with these teeth marks, which look very much like this. So this stage, the Mudga stage, occurs at about 26 to 27 days, and we call that the somite period in descriptive embryology. The transformation from the Alaka to the Mudga is very rapid, and during the last day or two of the Alaka stage, the embryo is beginning to develop some of the characteristics of the Mudga, that is, the somites begin to appear. The word Mudga means a piece of substance which has been chewed, and as used to describe this next phase of embryonic development, it should apply with the shape of a substance that the teeth have chewed. In fact, the appropriateness of this term Mudga has been indicated in modern embryology. It has been termed that after the formation of the embryo in the placenta, this stage, the embryo receives its nutrients and energy, thereby rapidly increasing the growth process. The bodily masses called somites, from which the bones and the muscle will form, start to appear. During the multitude of bead-like structures or somites that are present, the embryo has the appearance of a substance that had been imprinted by teeth. The processes of this period can be recognized in the following points. First, the appearance of the somites or the imprints changes constantly, and just as the teeth imprints change on the substance with each act of chewing. The embryo changes its overall shape, but the structure derived from the somites remain. And secondly, the embryo turns in its position due to the modifications in its center of gravity with the new tissue formation, similar to the turning of a substance with chewing. And third, just as a chewed substance becomes curled before being swallowed, so does the back of the embryo become curved. And four, as the somites form, the internal features of the embryo in the mudga stage are partly differentiated into organ anlaga, that means the beginning of structures, and partly undifferentiated. And this description is also stated in the Quran. Now, this is a later stage of mudga. You can see the tail that we all had at that stage, and this little flipper-like structure is what's going to be your upper limb. And so this is the mudga stage. Next slide. Then out of the chewed-like substance, partly differentiated and partly undifferentiated. And when I was asked what this surah meant, it said it's clear to me that an embryo at that stage is only partly differentiated. In other words, some of the organs, like the early development of the eye and the ear and the heart, some parts are well differentiated, others are poorly differentiated, and some are undifferentiated. And so we have this mixture which agrees exactly with this particular surah. Thus the term mudga is very meaningful, since the embryo is a lump of irregularly shaped tissue at this stage, and a creation of systems is occurring while the overall process is incomplete. Some of the organs will form in the mudga stage, and some will form in later stages. Now the next stage is called the izam stage. This subsequent stage, phase of development, is referred to as izam, which means bones, and the fetus does indeed acquire a cartilaginous skeleton after the mudga stage. Those of you that have studied embryology realize that first of all you have what we call mesenchymal bones made out of connective tissue, then they become cartilaginous, and then they become ossified and become bones, solid bones. The formation of the bone does not begin uniformly throughout the body. Rather, there's a sequential appearance of bony tissue. In recent decades, the process of osteogenesis in the human embryo has been reasonably well documented. Bone development in the limbs commences in the embryonic limb buds from these mesenchymal or connective tissue cells. Primary ossification centers appear in the femur during the 5th week. The femur is your thigh bone. And in the sternum, it's breastbone, and the maxilla, jaw, during 8 to 9 weeks. The timing of the izam phase has been mentioned in the following hadith. These simply show these various stages when, at this stage, the bones in the limb would be cartilaginous. The same here, we're starting to get little indications of the bones developing. And then this hadith says, when 42 nights have passed from the time of the nutfa, that is the time of conception, Allah sends an angel to it who shapes it and makes its ears, eyes, skin, muscles, and bones. In the early part of this phase, the embryo takes on a human appearance, tazwir ad-dami, and the hadith describes this with the word shapes. Before the 42nd day, it is difficult to distinguish the human embryo from the embryos of many animals, but at this stage it becomes clearly distinguishable in its appearance. I couldn't tell a mouse embryo from a human embryo or a rabbit embryo in those very early stages. So as this hadith is making clear, is that after this 40th day, when the angel sends an angel to it, which shapes it and so on, that it takes on its human characteristics. Accompanying this development is a straightening of the embryo described by the word sawa. During this period, the embryo becomes more erect and acquires a more evenly rounded body. Some of the generalized cells of the embryo begin to differentiate into various lines and modify into different functional moieties. This process results in straightening and the formation of organs necessary for viability. As the Quran describes, when God created you, then, and the word fa means then, made you even and straight, sawak, and then fa, again, modified you, adalak, and so on. According to the table, and is that on the slide, the table? Showing the different stages. Here's the table which you're referring to. You can see these stages listed along the side here, and you have the shaping stage and so on. These are all correlated with the age and days and the actual size of the embryo. According to this table, which compares the 3 ayat on the stages of development, it is apparent that the Isam stage corresponds with the straightening stage, taswiya. The word sawak in the Quranic statement indicates the following. First, to straighten the position of the body from a bent position, and also to make uneven things leveled. The embryo at the 7th week has a bent back, thus taking the shape of the letter C during the mudga stage. In the Isam stage, the bending position is straightened and the surface becomes more even due to the disappearance of prominences and depressions. Now the Lam stage, although precursor cells, which we call myoblasts or early muscle cells, are present adjacent to the developing bones, differentiation into skeletal muscle attachments appears after the ossification process in the shaft and the ends of the bones. I was asked many times, did the bones appear before the muscles? Well, they certainly do. If you want to be logical about it, you wouldn't have muscles until you had something to attach them to. So you have bones and then the muscles. And this is clearly stated in the Quran that the bones appear first. A major developmental landmark during the 8th week is the Lam stage, which describes the myogenesis, that is the formation of muscles, which marks the development of the definitive muscles in the trunk and the limbs and the beginning of movement. The muscles take their position around the bones, that is, clothing the bones, and continue the process of straightening and smoothing, tazwiya. In other words, as the muscles develop, they straighten the embryo up, which the straightening and smoothing which began in the Isam stage. It is now known that the gonads, that is, the developing sex glands, differentiate into testes and ovaries at this time, that is, during the 8th week, and the Quran refers to this development as well. Now the growth stage, or the nasha stage, the Lam stage represents the end of the embryonic period. We say that the embryonic period ends at the end of the 8th week, and then it becomes the fetal period. So here in this terminology, the Lam stage represents the end of the embryonic period, in other words, the end of the 8th week, during which much of the organogenesis, or the development of the organ, occurs. The Quran uses the word, how do we pronounce that, halanga? Yeah, okay. Which translated means made or changed. Okay. In referring to all the embryonic stages. Kalakna, is that how we say it? I can't get my tongue around that one. Kalakna, okay. Indicates that the new organized tissues are being formed in these stages. However, with the 9th week, the period of fetal development, nasha, begins. The Quran clearly distinguishes the beginning of this period by using the word ashanu nafu in the following statement. Then we, anasha nafu, cause him to grow and come into being and attain the definitive human form. Anasha nahu means to initiate, to grow and develop, and to rise and increase. The interpreters of the Quran understood the following meanings for the Quranic passage. development of the fetus into a creature capable of speaking, hearing, and seeing, breathing the spirit into the fetus, and find the characteristics of the Gnosis stage. The following characteristics of the Gnosis stage are rapid growth and development. And this, again, this chart is from my book. As you can see, in the early stages, the 9th week, 12th, and so on, there's very little growth occurring there. The organs are developing rapidly. And then as you see from the 12th week on, there's very rapid development.
وما كان هذا القرآن أن يفترى وما كان هذا القرآن أن يفترى من دون الله ولكن تصديق الذي بين يديه وتفصيل الكتاب لا ريب فيه من رب العالمين.
يا أيتها النفس المطمئنة ارجعي إلى ربك راضية مرضية فادخلي في عبادي وادخلي جنتي.
لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأن محمدا عبده ورسوله. رضيت بالله ربا وبالإسلام دينا وبمحمد رسولا. اللهم رب هذه الدعوة التامة والصلاة القائمة آت محمدا الوسيلة والفضيلة وابعثه مقاما محمودا الذي وعدته.